A very warm welcome to this very timely webinar titled Transforming the Way We Eat, the Relationship Between Agriculture, Food and Nutrition, and NDCs. It's a joint webinar organized by the Healthy Caribbean Coalition in partnership with the Rotary District 7 to 30 and the Caribbean Association of Nutritionists and Dieticians. This webinar will be led by a group of very accomplished panelists. Permit me to introduce our District Governor. District Governor Lyle, he's fondly known as DG, is the sitting DG of District 7 to 30. DG has been a Rotarian for almost 37 years, and as a member of the Rotary Club of St. Lucia, he served in many roles, including president in the year 1988-89. His achievements in the various roles are many and varied. In 1992, DG Lyle took a fifth, 1993. DG Lyle went on to serve as its charter president. He served as our assistant governor on 4 occasions in District 7 to 30 and was nominated to serve as DG in April of 2018. He is a very strong advocate for the core values of Rotary and stresses that integrity must never be compromised. He also believes that kindness is transformational. To conclude this very brief introduction, I wish to mention that Rotary continues to be able to do good work in our district and around the world because we have Rotarians like DG Lyle, whose contributions to the foundation ensures that the lives of the less fortunate are positively transformed. Distinguished attendees, fellow Rotarians, please join me in welcoming DG Lyle with a round of virtual applause. DG, the frame is yours, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz, for that more than flattering introduction. I say hi, everybody. It's my great pleasure to add my welcome to this joint HCC Rotary Candy webinar, Transforming the Way We Eat, the relationship between agriculture, food and nutrition, and non-communicable diseases. This webinar is part of HCC's ongoing work on promoting healthy food environments and the OECS Commission's commitment to address the issue of food security. As this is the first time that Rotary has collaborated with HCC and Candy, let me say how delighted we are to work together with such committed and dedicated partners. Permit me to share with you a little background as to what Rotary is and why we have come on board with HCC to champion this cause. Rotary is an organization that is best known for service to humanity. We are dedicated to 7 areas of focus: to build international relationships, improve lives, and create a better world, to support our peace efforts, and end polio forever. In promoting peace, Rotary encourages conversations to foster understanding within and across cultures. We're made up of men and women who have a common vision. Together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create a lasting change across the globe, in our community, and in ourselves. Rotary District 7 to 30, which covers 17 countries or territories in the Southern Caribbean, adopted childhood obesity prevention as a district-wide project because we believe that this problem has itself reached endemic proportions, and the cause in whole or in part of a number of NCDs, both in children and later on in adults, and warrants our attention and support now more than ever. COVID-19 has highlighted the NCD pandemic in our region, where 4 out of 10 adults are living with this group of diseases, and 1 in 3 children is overweight or obese. These diet-related illnesses are linked to the overconsumption of processed foods that are high in fats, salt, and sugar. Many of these foods are imported. In a region where many countries import more than 90% of what they consume, it is critical that efforts are made to address the issue of food insecurity which will be exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic. Our panelists will discuss how innovative individual and community-based agricultural practices, understanding the concept of what we grow, and increased investment in agricultural support and young agripreneurs can help to build a region that feeds itself sustainably. Taken together, these will contribute to improved health outcomes. It is now my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our moderators for this evening. Past Assistant Governor Marcelia Henry has been a Rotarian since July 2008, and she has served as Vice President, President, Secretary, and Vocational Service Chair of the Rotary Club of St. Martin's Sunrise. She is a Paul Harris Fellow. For the Rotary year 2020-2021, Marcelia is the Membership Chair for District 7020. She is an educator and curriculum developer by profession, and she is the Secretary General of UNESCO St. Martin and the interim head of the Division of Public Education. Charity Dublin is a community nutrition officer with the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment in Antigua and Barbuda. He is a member of the Healthy Caribbean Youth and the Caribbean Association of Nutritionists and Dieticians, CANDI. Over to you, Marcelia and Charity.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.
I have the honor of introducing our presenter for this evening. Professor Fitzroy Henry served 17 Caribbean countries for 18 years as the director of the Caribbean Food and Nutrition Institute, CFNI, a specialized center of PAHO, or WHO. For 14 years, he was the editor-in-chief of CNSI's journal, K-Janus, and its newsletter, NAM News. Since obtaining his doctorate from the University of London, he worked as a researcher, lecturer, author, and consultant on 5 continents. He has published more than 100 peer-reviewed articles as first author on food and nutrition in illness, wellness, sports, management, food economics, food policy, chronic disease, obesity, and public health. Since joining the University of Technology, Jamaica in 2013, he developed a unique postgraduate program in public health nutrition to train a cadre of leaders to address the problems of food security, obesity, and NCDs in this hemisphere. This training program has attracted several scholarships for talented students from across the region, and I am truly honored to be one such student. Welcome, Professor Henry. We are absolutely delighted to have you.
Thank you very much, Charity. And let me say good evening to all the Rotarians and other health professionals and other colleagues who are so very much interested in reducing the challenges that we have with obesity. I'm really grateful to the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, CANDI, and the Rotary across the Caribbean for selecting this topic, which is so critical to our health, our well-being, and indeed our survival. Yes, Charity, today you have the opportunity of being the teacher and I will be the student. So here we go, and please, I understand I must speak slowly because it's being translated into French, but I will try to keep within the 15 minutes. I come from the College of Health Sciences at the University of Technology in Jamaica, and I want to discuss with you some of the issues relating to the topic, very important topic of transforming the way we eat. So today I am going to ask the question, why do we need to transform? I would look at what is it we want to transform. I will consider the barriers to transforming, and finally, not what we must do, not what we think we should do or what we can do, but what really we must do and who must do it. I will try to get through all of those with 30 slides. So it's 2 slides for every minute. So the first question, why do we need to transform the way we eat? In other words, if we do not transform, what is it? What are the consequences? What's going to happen? Well, let me tell you what has been happening in the Caribbean. When we look at this first chart, we see here over a 10-year period for children, this is less than 5 years, okay, preschool children, and underweight has gone down, and look what has happened to overweight in the right panel. We see it has risen to about 14% of our children. These are children under 5 years. When we look at children now that are, or we should say women, girls that are 15 years and over, WHO some time ago, about 9 years ago, did an analysis, and they looked at the percentages of women that are 15 years and over. And you notice the high percentages of 82% right down to 67% being ranked 1 to 7. And we may say, okay, this is in Nauru, this is in Micronesia, this is in the Middle East, it doesn't concern us. But when we look at the next 7 ranked countries, we see some very familiar countries. We see Barbados, we see Trinidad, we see Jamaica, and so on. And we see the percentages, how high they are. When we come to the adult group, we see in Jamaica, rates, this is done by the Ministry of Health and the UWI, and I borrowed this slide from Professor Wilkes, and we see that this is obesity 30 BMI and over. So if you look at the middle one, which is combined male and female, you see it's about 20% in 2000, and it went up to about 29% in 2017, which is about 0.5% every year. That translates to several thousands of persons becoming obese every year. That's what it means. When we look at the Caribbean region, over the past decades, we see the trend there from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and we see a gender difference. When we continue to look at not only obesity, but some of the consequences, this is diabetes mortality over the same several decades, and we see how diabetes patterns the obesity in terms of the decades, with the gender difference very prominent. When we look at deaths from hypertension, we see again the same pattern. And as you know, diabetes and hypertension are 2 of the most common chronic diseases in the Caribbean region. I don't have a slide on cancers, but I can assure you that obesity contributes, even though genetics plays a big role, obesity still contributes a large part of the cancer morbidity and mortality in the region. Colleagues, I have breaking news for you. And the breaking news is what has been published in Obesity Reviews this month. And it was also reported in the Journal of American Medical Association by a colleague of mine, and I think most of you know him. He has published what is the relationship between obesity and the COVID, which we are now going through. We know that chronic disease is very much tied up with COVID. But what Barry Popkin has recently shown and published is that if you contract COVID and you are obese, you have a double chance of going into hospital and a 50% increased chance of dying. So this is the first set of studies that have actually looked at COVID in relation to obesity. So, and we know that obesity is very much tied up with what we eat. So this conference, this webinar today is so poignant and relevant and so important. PAHO did some analysis in Jamaica and identified some of the effects of obesity and chronic disease. They have shown that 78% of Jamaicans are now dying from non-communicable diseases. And Jamaica is projected to lose 77 billion Jamaican dollars over the next 15 years from NCD costs. And the return on investment is 2 to 1. In other words, every dollar that we invest, we can gain $2 worth. Now the question is, what do we invest in? So we move to question 2. What is it we need to transform? Transforming the way we eat, if we look at the, this is not the updated slide, but nevertheless, it shows the present eating pattern. I hope you might be able to see this. It shows, and I'm just going to mention a couple. Currently, we are consuming in the Caribbean, and this is the English-speaking Caribbean, but I dare say the French-speaking Caribbean is very similar. We are consuming about 17% of what we eat in calories from sugar. We are also, and we need to move that to 8%. We need to move our fats and oils from 14% to about 10%. And we need to improve our vegetables from 2% to about 8% if we really want to transform the way we eat. Now, this might look like just a few percentages, but there are implications of this. To transform the way we eat, we have to look at the availability of foods, the accessibility of foods, and the consumption. And there are barriers in relation to this. So question 3 is, how bold are we in the Caribbean, French and English, to remove those barriers? So let's look at availability. When we look at the amount of food available in the Caribbean, the red line you see is what we need. This is our goal. And we, apart from Haiti, we are well above the average requirement for food in all of our English-speaking countries. And you may say, okay, so what's the problem? The problem, of course, is the distribution of that food. But where does this food come from? The next slide shows you the change in terms of exports. This is the imports that we have been having from 1995 to 2011. And in all of our countries, you see that there has been an increase. And I can tell you, in recent years, this is 2011, you see how the blue is 1995, and we see the importation pattern in Caribbean countries. In some of our countries like Barbados and Bahamas, it's almost 90%, as DG said just now. And you may say, well, what's wrong? Because, you know, it's food, we grow some, we import some. So what is the problem? There is a problem. Why is imports a barrier? Because most of the imports are health retarding. In other words, when we analyze what comes into our countries, it's mainly fats, sugars, and ultra processed. and few of the foods we import are legumes and vegetables, and I'll show you some slides on that. So that's one problem. What about accessibility? We looked in Jamaica during COVID in 2020 June, and we look at the cheapest way of getting a 2,400 calorie diet. And the cost is on average about 477 Jamaican dollars or $3.25 US. Looks small. But in fact, as a percentage of persons earning a minimum wage, it is 48%. And if we look at different parishes and we look at the average, those who are earning a minimum wage for a family of 3, they will have to spend 106, this is the red at the bottom, an average 106% of their minimum wage to get the cheapest balanced diet. For a cashier clerk, it is 59, for a registered nurse, and for a manager, a mid-level manager, it goes into the teens. What about the consumption in fats? And we see coming up to 2017, this is the point I was making. The blue at the bottom is local, above is the imported, and the green line is what we really need. So you can see how much more fats we are consuming than what we need, and a large contribution comes from imports. When we look at sugar consumption, we only need about 108 kilocalories per person per day, and you can see how much more we have of sugar than we need, and you see the increasing contribution of imports from the last few decades. But when we look at vegetable, the green is what we need, and even from local or imports, we have very sharp deficits of what we need in vegetables. So it is very clear about what we need to transform for our health to prevent obesity and NCDs. And final question that is being asked is, who should do what to change this situation that I described? And if we want to halt obesity and NCDs, we have to look at agriculture, trade, we have to look at civil society, we have to look at education, health, other sectors, but notice I put the food industry bigger than the others because we're talking about food and we cannot ignore looking at the food industry. So let's start with the food industry. Right now, most of our approaches are towards the industry in terms of voluntary changes. And I dare say that within short order, we may have to move to mandatory changes. We want to reformulate products. We want, first of all, to get trans fats out of our food supply. So there's no place for that. Secondly, we need to reduce those excess sugars that DG talked about, the saturated fats, and also the sodium. We need to deal with the marketing of foods. And unfortunately, the food industry has taken advantage of the COVID pandemic, and they are now using their brand to supply foods, Burger and KFC and others, I'll call their names, to really support persons in need. And of course, you know what is going to happen after COVID. But anyway, and the other aspect, of course, is the media. We have to do what several other, about 80 countries in the world now, are limiting the marketing of these foods, particularly in children's programs. And of course, we have to look at food labeling, which is voluntary, believe it or not, in most of our countries. The Nutrition Facts Panel. And then we have to look at front of package labeling and make sure it is understandable for the general public. Are we bold enough to do this with the food industry? That's the question I have for us to discuss. The next group, of course, is agriculture. Are we bold enough to provide incentives for farmers, young and old? And we'll hear a little bit more from the panelists about what we're doing. in getting young people in agriculture to increase production, especially fruits and vegetables? Can we organize local farming communities to supply food and items to school feeding programs? We're going to hear about school gardens, but the larger farming community, rather than using a lot of the imported stuff in our school feeding, which we spend billions of dollars on in the Caribbean. Can we establish marketing outlets for indigenous foods to be more affordable and cut out so much of the middlemen who are men and women? I know today is International Day of the Men, but cut out the middlemen, and so that we can have the products very close to those who need it. And in so doing, can we reduce the $5 billion US import bill that we have in the Caribbean? This is the English speaking. What about our schools? Can we establish school meals policy that will guide us with nutritional standards? Can we discontinue the excessive use of sugar and fat containing foods offered in cafeterias and school vendors when our schools fully open? We see some efforts in several countries to limit that excess sugar, sweetened beverages in particular, but there are others. What about health? Our own health system. Can we develop regulatory guidelines on nutrition labeling that we talked about? And can we limit the advertising of fast food franchises, particularly in schools, children's programs? We can require food service establishments to display their calorie and fat content on the menus and placemats. In Jamaica, we have some companies already started to do that, and we welcome them, and we would like that to be across the board. And we cannot forget infant feeding. And we need adequate parental leave, not only maternal leave. Today is International Father's Day. So we need parental leave so that breastfeeding breaks and flexible support working hours can be established. And finally, the media. Are we bold enough to improve consumers' understanding of product labels, especially front of packet? Establish appropriate marketing policies on children's programs, and promote low-cost preparation methods of delicious local cuisine, both in French and English Caribbean. We have wonderful cuisines, and we'll hear from a chef today who will tell us some of those advantages. So what we're trying to do, colleagues, is not just change behavior, but I think we now need to change the environment so that we can enhance the behavior, because there are structural aspects in the environment that are preventing those who want to change behavior. And I ask the final question, are we bold enough to do all of these things? This is just a minimal list that I gave you, but are we bold enough to do them? I thank you.
Professor Henry, we want to thank you for that wonderful presentation. And what I like about it is that you provide specific examples so that we can see our situation within the Caribbean and also have it in comparison with others. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you as well for reminding us of those different points and factors that we tend to overlook. And I think your presentation did a wonderful job in summarizing those points that you want us to keep in mind, remind us, but also give us that initiative to look at other possibilities. So thank you so much, Professor Henry, for that dynamic, interesting presentation.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Henry.
Yes, indeed. And now, before we move on, I think it's time for us to get a little stretch and, get to move around a little bit before we go into the panel discussion. So we're going to have a fit break. And with the fit break, we will have Ms. Daniela Walwin, who will lead us into that. So Danielle, fit break, if you please. I don't know about you, but I feel energized, Danielle, after that fit break. And I want to thank you for enabling us to do so, because we need to also move around those muscles and to enable us to keep engaged, especially with these dynamic presentations that will follow in a moment. So we are moving into the panel discussion aspect of this webinar for this evening. And we will be having Dr. Iris Monroe, who will be giving us a presentation about aquaponics. And if you do not know what aquaponics is, I know you will be well informed after this great presentation that we will now have by Dr. Monroe. Dr. Iris Monroe, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Henry, and good evening to everyone. On behalf of the FAO, I thank you so much for providing me with the opportunity to discuss the development of aquaponics in the region. As it was already mentioned a few times, the challenges that the Caribbean faces in terms of the high food imports, and that over the majority of Caribbean countries imports over half of the food that's consumed, and for some it's 80%. And I'd like to really make sure that it's not just agriculture products that this refers to, but also fish. So even though you have the large Caribbean Sea, the majority of the smaller Caribbean states also import most of the fish that they consume. So for a country like Dominica, this can be 50%, but for a country like Barbados, they also import over 80% of the fish they consume. So increasing agriculture production is quite difficult due to, for example, water scarcity in the region, the decrease in arable land, as well as having less fertile soils. And increasing fish production is difficult for marine capture, as it faces significant challenges in terms of overexploitation, pollution, and climate change impacts such as coral reef bleaching. At the same time, we know that we need to increase fish and agriculture production for a healthier lifestyle, as was just referred to by Professor Henry. And aquaponics is considered to be a win-win, because you're producing both fish and crop vegetable production within one system. Because aquaponics is the integration of recirculating aquaculture and hydroponics. So in an aquaponics unit, water from the fish tank cycles through filters, whereby ammonia is turned into nitrate, which serves as the food for plants to grow, after which the water flows back to the fish. So some of the major advantages of aquaponics, besides producing both fish and crop vegetables, is that it uses 10 times less water than traditional farming. So for areas where here in the Caribbean, which is seeing a decreasing rainfall, this is very important. It also uses less space than traditional agriculture and doesn't need arable land. And it can grow crops in less time. In addition, there's less need for chemical fertilizers, and you need a reduced use of pesticides, only organic pesticides. And you can sort of adapt the systems to different requirements. So you can build very small domestic systems, as well as semi-commercial and commercial systems, as well as, for example, educational units. But at the same time, it's also obviously facing, few challenges in terms of the initial startup costs can be quite expensive in comparison to soil crop vegetable production or hydroponic. A farmer would need extensive knowledge in terms of fish, bacteria, and plant production. And if you make a small mistake, then this can have catastrophic impacts and can collapse the system. For example, if your pump breaks down. In addition, you need daily management. It's kind of like having a pet. And you need reliable access to electricity, fish feed, and plant seeds. So FAO has been supporting the rollout of aquaponics in the Caribbean region. And we started out with developing, demonstration farms and building a hub of expertise throughout the region. So for example, we supported building demonstration farms in Antigua, in Barbados, as you can see on these pictures, as well as in the Bahamas. And obviously, we work with both private sector farmers. So, for example, in Barbados, as well as Antigua, as well as with government entities to develop these demonstration farms in the Bahamas, St. Lucia, Trinidad, and Dominica. And then from the demonstration farm, we support the rollout for farmers. So, for example, in Barbados, we support the building of the demonstration farm, and subsequently, the entrepreneur will then train 30 farmers and 10 school teachers. We also support the development of special expertise in the region. So, for example, we had a regional workshop on aquaponics value chains. And in early 2021, we'll be having a, together with the credit union in Tobago, we'll be doing a training to improve the farmers' understanding of financial record keeping and business planning, because this is obviously starting new, so we need to build all these kind of information for the farmers. And we also think it's very important to start promoting aquaponics in schools. And we are trying to start working on this in Antigua and Barbuda and Barbados. Around the world, small-scale aquaponics units are being championed in various educational institutes, such as primary schools, secondary schools, colleges, and universities, as it can teach the youth about sustainable agriculture techniques. For example, rainwater harvesting, nutrient recycling, and organic food production, and you can integrate that into the lesson plans. It's important to create this interest from the youth. And it's fairly easy for them because they don't need land to start. It has a high level of technology, which interests the youth. And they can start easy with a small unit, as you see in this picture on the left-hand side. This is a small aquaponics unit whereby the fish are in the lower blue tank, and then obviously the vegetables are in the higher up levels. And you will also see in the Bahamas where they're doing, they're showing school children around. It's very important to start early with building, you know, getting the youth to be interested in farming in this way, because we need to ensure that the cities become less dependent on food imports and improve food security. And we need to do that through the youth while ensuring economic, social, and ecological sustainability. Thank you very much.
Dr. Monroe, I want to thank you for that presentation, where I'm just going to mention a few things where you touch about the benefits of promoting aquaponics in school and starting early. You also talked about the importance of sustainable development techniques. And I know that there will be questions later on about what are some of these sustainable development techniques that you would encourage others. And then one more thing that I thought was very interesting, you gave specific examples from our Caribbean islands. So I want to thank you for that presentation. Now we will be going into the second presentation for this evening, and this will be done by Mr. Alpha Senon, who will be discussing WhyFarm. And he will be showing us and discussing interesting ways in which we can get the youth strengthening and involved in this process. So with that said, Mr. Alpha Senon, you have the floor.
Hi, right, pleasant good afternoon, everyone. Right, yes, so thank you for having me. I would be diving into a very quick presentation to really using the case of WhyFarm in Trinidad and Tobago, to which I'm the founder of that organization. And I'm just going to share some examples of how we have engaged young people using different effective, creative ways to ensure that we have food in the future. So this is me here in my dashing bush patch, and I like to use this bit here and say that, you know, it's my mission for every young person to look and have a nice smile like me in a wet, soggy, dashing bush patch. Next slide. So at WhyFarm, we said that there must be an adventure to encourage youth in agriculture. starting with a main character who's branded as the world's most powerful food provider. We created a superhero character to encourage young boys and girls. Why? The transformative years of conditioning one's mind is between birth and 12. We cannot wait until university to teach our children about food security. We cannot wait until they get a PhD to learn about climate change adaptability. So Agriman promotes sustainable agriculture to children, right? Teaching them to plant one tree, they will eat for free. This will guarantee food security, ensuring that this younger generation puts agriculture in the minds, in their hearts, and in their souls. Next slide. So we use different creative ways and mediums to be able to teach. One such medium is via comic books, right? And, you know, we put in stories into these comic books that allows children to be able to tap into their creativity, to their imagination, to their vision. You know, when we think about a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old saying that, "Mommy, I want to be a doctor," right? Why? Because this is what is marketed to him or her. This is what they see on TV. This is what they see on their app. This is what they see in their storybook. So we created the Agriman Adventures to give stories, creative messages for these children to learn about food and nutrition security, being responsible, not wasting one grain of rice, right? Eating local, eating healthy, right? Understanding that if we must change, if we must get children back into the, if you change the way children eat, they must get back into the kitchen. Next slide, right? So, you know, we have different characters, and, you know, this particular character here, Agribot, speaks to digital agriculture in particular. You know, coming out of COVID, you know, we find ways of being able to get different characters involved into our story so that children may be able to stay in the loop and not only think that agriculture is just about, you know, a hard farming work, but also technology. Next slide, right? And you know, to be very honest, of course, we promote sustainable agriculture, safe agriculture, responsible agriculture, while we do promote hydroponics and aquaponics as well. But I'm a strong advocate for dirt as well too. You know, I'm always of the opinion, and I always say that you know, you cannot grow a dasheen or a cassava in a hydroponics. You know, so I'm not one that says dirt is dirty, and, you know, we shouldn't stay away from dirt, and, you know, we should only do the aquaponics or the hydroponics. I know, but it's finding a safe and responsible way of doing it. Because while there are some youths who are interested in aquaponics and hydroponics, there are also youths interested very much in the dirt as well, in the soil, right? Next slide. And, you know, we have now come to a time where we have to find creative ways of engaging young people. So at WhyFarm, we always say is putting the cool in agriculture and calling it agriculture, and slapping some swag in agriculture to call it swagriculture. So if we could farm in our sneakers, right? No land space, no excuse. There's 99 ways to farm without soil use, right? So next slide. And you know, it's all about being able to promote agriculture to the young people as well, you know, being able to get them interested. So we work with the children, but as well as we work with these younger persons as well to build their capacity to really develop their skills. You know, we have an interesting program that we run called the Agripreneur Mastermind Program, Amp It Up, where we find TNT's next top agripreneur. And that have really kicked off last year, and we expect to continue into 2021. Next slide. So one of my most important messages this afternoon is that we have realized that you cannot only, if we're talking about getting children eating healthy, yes, we want them to grow healthy, grow food, but we also want them to be able, the food that they are growing, to be able to prepare that food as well in very creative ways. So on my screen here now, which should be almost my final slide, you know, we have a very innovative colleague that we work with, right? Her name is called Gabriella, and she did a really important video with Agriman on making a pizza out of melon gen, aka baigan, aka what else we'll call eggplants, right? So it's finding creative with them. We could find this video on YouTube via Grow Garden project funded by the UNDP. Next slide. And to wrap things up this evening is about getting the children engaged using agri-edutainment, agricultural educational entertainment, to ensure that we have young people to feed us in the future. I think, next slide. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. And I want to say thank you very much for giving me this time to share with you all. And I look forward to discussing more and probably answering some questions during the panel segment. Thank you.
WhyFarm is such an exciting initiative. Alpha, we can tell that you are absolutely passionate about promoting agriculture among the youth, and you're doing it in such an innovative way. And I, for one, I am excited to engage in some agriculture. We're going to ask our next presenter, Mrs. Rosalind Clark, to step up to the mic. Mr. Senon has just described the need to engage youth meaningfully, and schools have proven to be a key environment in which this has occurred. What do schools need to do to get this started? Describe the successes, challenges, and lessons learned in supporting the development of school gardens in Barbados. Mrs. Clark, over to you.
Good night. My name is Rosalind Clark. I'm a Paul Harris Fellow in the Rotary Club of Barbados. I'm also the project chair of the Owen Arthur Agri-Kids Project, a project named after our late Prime Minister. Tonight, I want to talk to you about the Owen Arthur Agri-Kids Project, how we got started, our successes, and our challenges. The Rotary and Rotaract Clubs of Barbados started this project in August this year to educate children in primary schools about the benefits of farming and to get kids interested in growing their own food in a sustainable way. We wanted to educate the children about proper nutrition so that they would eat a healthy, nutritionally adequate diet. Our objective was to form a community group interested in partnering with Rotary to complete this project because we wanted to encourage behavioral changes in children by their hands-on method of farming. We started with 4 primary schools. Our nutrition education was supplemented by physical exercise, weight management behaviors like sugar reduction in drinks and food. We also wanted to create an interest in students in pursuing a career in agriculture or environmental studies, giving them the options for future work, for the future world of work. Now, how did we get started? First of all, we formed a team. We chose schools to involve them in the project. And we set about contacting the principals and teachers to get buy-in because we need stakeholder buy-in, of course. So smaller teams were mobilized and we had 1 team per school. We performed site visits and based on the observations we made, we developed a working plan for each school based on the conditions of the site and the agriculture methods that we were to use. containers, greenhouses, agricultural fruit orchards. We then included the work to be done on the infrastructure and started a planting schedule. That was the easy part. Now the challenges then had to be, our challenges started and we had to deal with them. We needed funds. Funds were raised from corporate Barbados. We needed to get equipment, tools, containers, seedlings, topsoil, fertilizer, a lot of things that we didn't know we didn't think about when we got started. We needed manpower too for the manual labor, so we used Rotarians. The Barbados Defense Force partnered with us, and we had volunteers and staff at the schools where possible. In some cases, we had to hire people to do the work. This is where partnerships were developed, and this was one of our successes. Rotary and Rotaract Clubs of Barbados, we worked together, the young and the old. That was a success. The Barbados Defense Force, they helped us with the engineering expertise. Now, the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados is running our educational program, and they provide videos, lesson plans, and manpower to conduct the training sessions for us. Major challenges that we had, from time to time we started, from the time we started the preparation of the garden beds, we realized we were novices and needed some time. We needed to get expertise, so we brought in an agronomist. We needed physical education, some kind of activity for the children, which we worked out with the schools. And that was incorporated in the school classrooms. So, but the buy-in of the Ministry of Education was important. You can't walk into schools and start to implement projects without the approval of the ministry. So we got some pushback, and we also got some pushback from food vendors. And we also needed the parents who were getting involved because of their children's involvement. There's no legislation or policies and systems in place to fund projects like these in schools and to give teachers time to do what is considered volunteer work. So that is something that we have to consider in the future. So to make this project sustainable, sustainability, we have to look at solving some of these problems. So on the issue of sustainability, principals and teachers of the schools should be given time, funding, tools, and manpower. Are we bold enough, according to the professor? Are we bold enough to do that? Lessons learned from phase 1, which is what we're doing now, can be used to develop a plan to roll out phase 2. And phase 2 would really be to expand to more schools through the involvement of the Ministry of Education, with the Ministry of Education running this project instead of the Rotary Club. We're hoping that they will look at it and provide funds and manpower to complete the work and keep up the momentum. A major success, or the major success of this project, is that the children really loved working in the gardens. They were fascinated. In order to maintain enthusiasm for this project, we have to really become bold and look at funding and giving proper manpower to a project like this for it to become sustainable. So I will now show you a video of the work done during the project and how we started from grass fields and transformed them to gardens. I'm sure you have questions. I'll be available if you need to ask anything about the project.
Mrs. Clark, thank you for sharing the school garden experience in Barbados. One major takeaway was the need for engaging multiple stakeholders to make initiatives like this not only a success, but also sustainable. As your video highlighted, no one sector, no one organization can do it alone. Chef Dane Sandler. All of the previous speakers described how farm to table, they describe the farm aspect of farm to table. However, we want to explore what happens next. What happens after we have the food in our hands? What happens after we have the food in our homes? What are some healthy tips and tricks to get people to consume healthy local foods?
Good night, everyone. So we've been speaking about farm to table. But farm to table is not a new concept. The name might be, but the concept has been around since the hunter-gatherers. The men hunted, the women gathered, and they cooked, and what they directly caught and picked, they cooked and ate. So because of the introduction of Western influences and fast food services, along with long working hours, extracurricular activity for kids, lack of healthy, convenient options, we have started to look for the more convenient options, which are the unhealthiest options. And the biggest issue we have right now is the lack of availability of fast, healthy options. Because microwavable dinners, drive-thrus are becoming more of the norm, and there are less persons in the kitchen actually cooking. Sugar, flour, sodium, and fatty foods are on the rise. And the major problem of the increase in NCDs is that persons do not know what they're consuming. An order of fries from a fast food establishment contains 2 teaspoons of oil, and a soda contains 5 to 7 teaspoons of sugar. Now, we wouldn't normally eat oil or a teaspoon of sugar just like that, but we're consuming it without. As a society, we need to revisit our local produce and have chefs play a vital role in showcasing creative and attractive ways of cooking and utilizing these products, and use our social media platforms to promote them. You can have fresh items available, but if somebody doesn't know how to prepare it or use it, it's no help to them. It's like having a car in your garage and not knowing how to drive. So as chefs, we have a vital role to play in this. Parents as well are the first and foremost important persons in the household. They have a duty to introduce fruits and vegetables to their kids from a young age and eat alongside their children, because children mimic what their parents do and they mimic the lifestyle their parents choose. Personally, as a private chef and caterer, I've tried to create dishes over the years to incorporate our local ingredients and showcase healthy and fun ways to do so. Colors attract children, and as you see in the photos here, all the meals I try to put out are as colorful as possible and attractive as possible. If you walk down the snack aisle, you see all the colors popping up, children pick snacks because of it. So we have to try to get creative in how we present it. Include salads and vegetables in your daily meals. Salads and fruits in daily meals alongside with vegetables. And I also have started to put a twist on popular dishes. We have lasagna, where we replace the flour pasta with sweet potato and breadfruit, and replace the ground beef with pulled pork. So we have a sweet potato and breadfruit lasagna, which has become a big hit. And also we've replaced regular potato chips with breadfruit chips and sweet potato chips, and also moved away from frying and more along the lines of baking. We have to make snacks for our children into fruits and vegetables rather than cheese sticks and cookies. I've been working alongside the slow food movement in Barbados for a number of years, promoting the linkage between farmers and chefs, promoting sustainability. And recently, due to the COVID pandemic, they started a soup kitchen feeding over 5,000 persons over the course of 4 months during the pandemic. And this provided healthy, nutritious hot meals. Because due to the pandemic, persons opted for the cheaper option, which of course was reasonable given financial status of some. But to promote healthy lifestyle and to fight and build immune systems, we need healthy foods. Also, as Rosalind just mentioned, you need to get into the schools from a young age, encouraging kitchen gardens and incorporating children into farming. Because children, as much as children eat, they don't know what they eat. We asked a group of children where their meat comes from. They said the supermarket. They don't know farms. Some don't know the animals that meats come from. They can't identify vegetables. So that's something we need to get a part of the school curriculum, food and nutrition. Because you cannot teach someone that has been eating for 15 and 16 years to rethink how they eat. You have to start from their minds. You have to mold their minds from them. The school meals program also needs to play a vital role in nutrition of students on a daily basis. Unfortunately, for some, school meals program is sometimes the main and only meal for some students. So if they continue along a path with unhealthy school meals, they will only know unhealthy diet because that's the one. In essence, as we do with monitoring our spending habits to get the most of our money, we need to monitor our eating habits with every meal to get the most out of our nutrition. NCDs are becoming rampant and are as bad a pandemic as COVID is because it has affected us last 20 years and continues to consume our population. Here's a short video. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, of my daughter. She is 9 years old. She started cooking from the age of 3 with me, and now she creates her own meals. She can cook a whole, for my birthday, she wrote and did a whole menu. But she started young, she asked questions, and I always involved her, even if it was from just passing me the vegetables or washing the carrots or putting salt in the pot. She saw what needed to be done, and now she is able to do it on her own. So that's what we need to do with our kids, involve them in our daily preparation and consumption, speak to them about healthy choices.
Okay, my apologies, Chef Dane. We don't have that video, and I would have loved to see your daughter engaging in the kitchen. Our mouths are certainly watering after your presentation and looking at those really great photos. And I love that you encourage having children play an active role in the kitchen. I also love that you've used these beautiful, vibrant produce, because the saying is true, we do eat with our eyes first. Unhealthy food doesn't have to be bland and boring. It can be exciting and vibrant and enticing and mouth-wateringly delicious. I'm also happy that you've highlighted the use of breadfruit and sweet potato, because we know that these are staples in Caribbean countries, and these foods are nutrient-packed and they're amazing sources of complex carbohydrates, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And there's so many creative ways that we can incorporate them into our regular meals. And I know that, like me, many of the attendees would have been taking lots of notes so that we can try some of these tips out over the weekend. I know that we are all bursting with questions, so I'm going to open the floor for our question and answer segment. And I'm just going to invite Marcelia to join us.
Indeed.
Awesome. So that we can have your questions answered.
I know that there have been buzzing questions in your head, but we were able to collect a few of them that were placed in the Q&A. So I'm going to be asking those of you all who still have questions, please feel free to do so right now. But we can start with Professor Fitzroy Henry. There were a few questions that were posed towards your presentation that we would like you to respond to. And the first one is as follows. It strikes me that these import and export patterns can be tied directly to the rules of the international trade regime and the previous patterns set up by colonizers for export agriculture. They're asking, is this a common idea? Are there researchers working on these issues? How do we get decision makers to forego short-term revenue for import duties? Professor Henry?
Wow, that's a big one. But essentially, the questioner is asking about the international trade regime and how it impacts the food we eat, basically. And it's a very important question because it really deals with our government signing on to the World Trade Organization agreements, which they should do, but recognizing that the World Trade Organization has a policy of expanding trade. That is their mandate. As they say very clearly in their website that they are not there to improve health, not that they cannot, but their purpose is not to improve health. It's not for social justice. It's not to protect the environment. It's to expand trade. If there's a fallout in terms of health, well, so be it. And we see what is happening when we do the analysis between the trade regime and what happens with several countries. Unfortunately, many of our countries are unable to take the opportunities that the World Trade Organization offers in terms of expanding trade. Maybe in time to come when we can, wriggle out of the economies of scale with our small countries. And we know that larger companies in the Caribbean are utilizing the WTO agreements to their effect, but a large part, if we do a balance of it, we are suffering. And, this is part of the reason why we see the decimation of our bananas and now our sugar and many other products, and we see what is happening with some of our indigenous foods as well. So yes, the trading regime has a lot to do with it. If anybody is working on it, of course. We can analyze it, but I'm not sure what our policymakers can do right now. I know the CARICOM Secretariat, they have a unit there that looks at the trade agreements and try to advise countries and governments of how they can take advantage of some of the clauses that you can make exceptions for in terms of health. You can actually get an exception. So generally, words like subsidies are not generally used in this current regime. We cannot talk about levying taxes because we have to tax all like products, whether they are imported or local. And it seems easy that all we need to do is tax the products that are coming in and then let our local products flourish. But it's not as easy as that because you'll be violating different clauses. So very good question in terms of the international trade agreements. And it is, I don't know when we are going to take advantage of it because we will continue to. The World Bank says that we are what? Middle to high income countries. But I can tell you the farmers that are in the rural areas would not agree with the World Bank assessment. So I'm not so sure when we will be able to escape all of those regimes, but there are still opportunities and avenues to improve our local produce. And I'm so excited to hear my colleagues talking about the innovative things that we can do despite the trading arrangements, in our own homes and in our own communities to really address the issue. But I think the question really talks more about what is happening at the policy level, at the national level, which we cannot ignore. So we can do a lot of things, as we see here, out of the box thinking, innovative ideas, but we really have to look also at the policy issues, because that will have a dominant effect on most of the foods that we have in our available to us and those that we consume. So thanks for the question.
Thank you as well. Charity, I'll let you pose the second question.
Thank you so much. As we continue in our question and answer segment, I'd just like to invite all of the panelists to turn on your cameras so that we can see your lovely faces. The next question goes to Alpha. We've had many questions asking about how we can get access to your brilliant comics. Could you tell us where the Agriman comic books are available?
Yes, sure. We have them on Amazon. I mean, we have them in several stores here in Trinidad and Tobago. But what we usually do with folks across the region who we have worked with, that we will sort of ship to, like, you order through WhyFarm and we ship it to you. So I gave my email address in the chat box. So folks who's willing to find out more, they could always email me and we could talk further. Thank you.
Wonderful. And now we move on to yet another question. So please continue to ask questions. We're going to continue to post them to the panelists. So please feel free to do so. The next question that I'm going to post now to the other panelists, which is Chef Dane. Do you have a YouTube channel or a platform where you can share those recipes?
Yes, I am on Instagram. My Instagram page is very active and very colorful. We post meals. I think the video with my daughter is on my Instagram page as well. It's Chef Dane, no, Caribbean Villa Chef, sorry. Yes, Caribbean Villa Chefs. You can find me there, and there are some recipes posted as well.
Thank you. Charity?
Thanks, Chef Dane. Our next question is for Mrs. Clark. Could you share how much was expended on this project? Is there a framework in place for Rotary clubs to develop these initiatives?
We budgeted about $5,000 per school, and our budget was about, we had 4 schools, so we budgeted about $25,000. But depending on how much input we had from the school and the parents and neighbors, we were able to probably, in one case, the container garden that you saw, that was the cheapest of the schools. But the one with the greenhouse and gardens, you can see that was like a mini farm. That was about $10,000 Barbados, which is 5,000 US. So we went, one school costed about $4,000, and we went to as far as 10,000 to get the greenhouse and irrigation. The school, West Terrace, had irrigation, water tanks, greenhouse, barrel, container gardens. It had all forms of gardening, the environmental kind and the garden beds. So I would say that Rotary clubs can start it, but it does cost some money.
Thank you for that response. Indeed, and I know that others will definitely take this as a best practice, and thank you for sharing. The next question will be to Dr. Monaru, and the question is as follows. Why is aquaculture in its infancy, and how can it contribute to climate resilience? Dr. Monaru?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, well, let me just first say that, yeah, obviously aquaculture in the world is not in its infancy, because about 50% of all fish consumed in the world comes from aquaculture. But in the region, it's still in its infancy. Well, one of the things I highlighted was about having this sort of hub of expertise. You know, people need to learn from each other. So that was one of an issue that was there in the region. Aquaculture also costs, you know, can cost quite a lot of energy, of which the costs are quite high. And the investment costs can be quite high for different aquaculture systems. And if you don't have enough information, it's hard to attract investment into such a sector. In terms of aquaponics and climate resilience, well, one of the issues I was already saying is that it's very water efficient, which is climate resilience in itself, because you use a lot less water. But you can also think about using renewable energy sources, for example, for the energy that you need. And we also support building systems which can be dismantled quite easily in case of a hurricane. So, for example, with traditional agriculture, where, you know, which might be flooded due to a heavy hurricane, which obviously can't dismantle, but in terms of aquaponics, you could potentially dismantle it in such a way that you could still rebuild it afterwards. So these are different ways that you can try and improve the climate resilience of an aquaponics system.
Thank you, Dr. Iris. Our next question is for Professor Henry, and it's as follows. You stated the price for 2,400 calories is 48% of the minimum wage in Jamaica as of June 2020. Is this an increase from pre-COVID prices?
The short answer is yes, it is an increase. But we must remember that the cost of food has been going up all the time. If you look at the food price index for all the countries in the region, you're going to see an increase year after year. What additional contribution COVID has made to that increase, we have to see what happens with the next survey that we do. In relation to minimum wage, so the answer is yes, the price has gone up, but I don't know if it is more than what would have gone up under normal circumstances. We hear that the cost of food has been steep during the COVID time, and that was June when we did that survey. And we know that it is still in vogue. So we're actually doing another survey to see exactly how persistent that high price is. In relation to the minimum wage, then it really is determined by what the country decides, if the country decides to increase the minimum wage. Because the very same price, if it's 48% in June, suppose the minimum wage goes up. Right now in Jamaica, it's 7,000 Jamaican dollars per week. So if you increase the minimum wage, obviously the percentage goes down, and so on and so on. But I think rather than, and we use this to encourage authorities to increase the minimum wage, because I showed another slide which indicated that for persons earning a minimum wage for a family of 3, it is 106% of their wage. This is assuming that there is only one income earner, you know, a man, a woman, and a child. And most of our families in the Caribbean are more than 3, and most of our families have more than one income earner. But nevertheless, it shows how vulnerable our communities are to these rising food prices. I should also make 2 additional points. One is that many of those persons who are earning the minimum wage do get social protection from the government, and that helps out. And most of our Caribbean families, you know, get assistance from abroad through remittances. So with the remittances, the social protection, this is how they survive the 106% of their salary. Not everybody is so successful in getting support from friends and family overseas, so they do fall into that poverty trap. So this mechanism that we're using is a way of looking at vulnerability of families. And we can turn it around, because by looking at the cost of food over time, we can also turn this into a health promotion approach in telling the community and the public which are the best buys that you can have in terms of what is available on the market at current prices. So good question. It's gone up, and to what extent it has gone up because of COVID, I don't know, but compared to pre-COVID, it is much higher than what it is. It was 48%, and in October last year in Jamaica, on average across the parishes, it was like 40, early 42 or something like that percent. So it has gone up. And we expect that, you know, this will continue once the prices stay up because of COVID. So thanks for the question.
I just want to add something to what Fitzroy said.
Yep.
As Fitzroy mentioned, as a household of 3, mother, father, and child, what we found in schools is that households like this, the children depend on the school meals program. So that's why it's a vital part of their well-being, but it needs to be a meal of substance and nutrition to take them through the day. Because when they go home, they don't have anything there to eat. So that's why we need to revisit the school meals program and try to incorporate more local and more fresh and healthy options.
That is so correct. I don't know I know every Caribbean country has a school feeding program to varying extent. Jamaica is probably the largest, with about 400,000 children being fed every day. This is just for lunch. It's a massive program. And the government spends, as you can imagine, billions of dollars on this program. And what Chef said just now is so important, and it's supposed to cover, I think, 1/3 of the calories that you need for the day. That is the intention. We know that the content of the school meals program is not what we would like. And those providers tell us that they cannot afford the high cost of the vegetables to go into that program. And so what we have is largely you know, chicken and rice, and sad to say, and we have a dilemma, which I think we should recognize, is that if we decide to have a more balanced approach, in other words, the balanced meals by incorporating vegetables with the budget that they have, it means that the 400,000 that they feed every day will have to come down to maybe 250,000 for those to get a more balanced and healthy. So the bottom line is, how can we get you know, more cost-effective ways of providing school meals? And this is why the farmers, you know, what we heard today about the innovations that we can see can happen not only in the school garden, but also around the country. It's really ironic that we live in so-called plantation economies, and yet we cannot even use our local foods for our school programs. But that's another webinar all by itself.
And that's where one of the things that we discussed, I just wanted to interject for our school gardens. You have the food growing right in the backyard. So you have your vegetables, your lettuce, your cabbage, and we discussed that with some of the principals. Once the gardens get going, we can just go out and collect what we need and incorporate that into the school meals program.
Very good.
Okay, thank you so much for those those brilliant answers. This is such an interesting conversation, and I'm sure that we could continue for the rest of the night. We have so many unanswered questions, but unfortunately, we have to bring this evening session to a close. I'd like to invite Sir Trevor Hassel, President of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, to offer some closing remarks.
So thanks very much. What a truly wonderful webinar. I think it's been attended by nearly 120 persons. So first, thank you to everyone for really excellent contributions to the webinar. And a really very special thanks to those who have made it possible. This is the first webinar undertaken by the HCC in collaboration with Rotary 7030 and Candy, and it's been so tremendously successful. I'm already sending a signal that we need to have a follow-up. The reality is that the issue of the way we eat and what we eat is important for us in the Caribbean. Whereas you've heard, more than 60% of the food we consume is imported and is predominantly ultra-processed, high in sugar, high in salt, etc. And where throughout the region, unhealthy fast, we often refer to it as junk food, is the food of choice for many people. You know, the late George Lamin said it very well when he said, and I quote, "We have allowed the colonization of the eating habits of our palates and surrendered our palates to foreign control." As we've heard over the course of the last hour and a half then, the need is for Caribbean people to be better informed and to practice healthy eating, for policymakers to enact policies that enhance food security and protect consumers from the undue influence of food and drink manufacturers, and for the food and beverage industry to produce healthy offerings. Today's webinar has explored the ways in which individual and community level strategies can be used to practically and sustainably improve health outcomes by improving access to healthy local foods, all as part of what so many of us are now referring to a process of building back better in response to and as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we in the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, in Rotary 7030, and in the Caribbean Association of Nutritionists and Dietitians, we have been in many respects been well informed, and we've been given our marching orders. Our challenge now then is to translate the knowledge, the words, the examples into action. With those few words, I want once again to thank all participants, to thank the attendees and the delegates. And as I said earlier, I look forward to the next webinar in the series. Good night, everyone.